sign.
After the tone, please state your name.
And equity consultant. She's actually the CEO as well. But I wanted to talk a little bit about Careers Never Imagined to those of us that are on the call. Now, we had pretty much everybody introduce themselves, and we talked about who was on the call, but for those of Jim's team that just arrived, we have you folks on the call from Susquehanna CTC. We have Bill Forsyth also on the call from Columbia Montour AVTS. Penn College, both myself and my director, Jeanette Carter, are a part of this, and then Mimi Lufkin from NATE, National Alliance for Partnerships and Equity. Kind of had our introductions here. What Careers Never Imagined is, if you haven't been fully kind of told about it or not, can best be summarized as a pilot program that we've been doing at various locations. We talked about it here a few minutes ago, but it's a pilot program that's supported by a 3-year grant, the Natural Gas Technician Education Partnership. That's an NSF grant that we received here at Penn College. Jeanette was championing that here on our side. And we're entering year 2 of that grant and expanding to 1 at Susquehanna CTC, possibly 2 pilot sites, 2 additional pilot sites, Bill, if we can get you on board and full steam ahead. We'll be expanding to your sites from our current 3 that we've done for the past year. We've worked with Jersey Shore Area School District, Williamsport Area School District, and Sun Institute of Technology, or Technical Institute, excuse me, Sun Technical Institute. And like I said, this is a gender equity.
Hey, Liz.
Yes, ma'am.
And don't forget Pennsylvania College of Technology, Industrial and Engineering.
Yes, you're right. Thank you, Jeanette. You're right. On the post-secondary side, we are also doing these same strategies, or our determined strategies at Penn College in the School of Industrial and Engineering Technologies. So thank you, Jeanette, for that reminder. This initiative is supported by Penn College, by our partnering schools, the NSF grants, and National Alliance for Partnerships and Equity, NATE. So let me move along here. We'll talk about the goals. These goals that we have listed here are the goals of the NSF grant, and I just wanted to kind of frame it a little bit for you as to why gender equity came into the picture initially. The NSF grant for natural gas, we had 4 goals that NSF kind of told us, and there were negotiations back and forth, and if you really want to know about all the background, I can let Jeanette talk to that. But the first goal that they had, that they wanted us to do, was to modify existing technician associate degree programs. And what that means is that the post-secondary side, we were to modify associate degree programs that could funnel into the natural gas industry to support the natural gas industry, not to create a whole new associate degree program, but just certain particular courses in programs to be able to educate students more about natural gas. The second goal was implement dual enrollment STEM courses in the secondary schools related to natural gas, and that's part of the Penn College Now initiative that Bev Huntsberger kind of spearheads, and to really look at focusing on more Penn College Now courses that can then matriculate into associate degree programs that would then graduate students who could enter the natural gas industry. Okay? I'm going to skip down to goal 4, which was enhanced faculty development and continuing education. And Jeanette, correct me if I'm wrong. That's basically just professional development for secondary and post-secondary faculty related to natural gas. Am I correct in that?
That's correct. It's really, yes. And the continuing education is our support and our assistance with the ShaleNet conference in Altoona every year.
I see. Okay. Great. Well, then this brings us to goal 3, which was an interesting dialogue back and forth of NSF was asking, what are you going to do for the diversity of technicians? How are you going to enhance the diversity of technicians that you're able to graduate for the natural gas industry? And we were We were in dialogue about minorities, about race and ethnicity, and how that comes into play. And the final question came, what are you going to do to increase the number of women in your natural gas pipeline? And that was then how we were able to be introduced to NAEP, because Jeanette did a little bit of research and talked to some folks. And the recommendation was made that we call upon Mimi and Company, because NAEP provides a data-driven model to develop strategies to increase your enrollment of women in STEM programs, so that you know you're doing something and you're assessing if that is in fact helping, and we're not just looking at something that we take from a conference and implementing it at the school level, but we're actually doing strategic programming to ensure that we increase our gender equity in our programs at the secondary school. So initially, from the Outreach for K-12 perspective, it was driven by NSF. Now, I'm going to move on here. What also has driven, as you'll see in the slide, is Perkins. And this has been a driving factor both at Penn College, but also has been a driving factor that's gotten our pilot sites on board to help as well. This is important, and this is something we were talking about before Jim's team came on to play here. This initiative with Perkins, both the participation and the completion, I don't know how much I need to speak to this, of the importance of increasing these federal numbers because of the Perkins funding that secondary and post-secondary receives. But I know at Penn College we have room for improvement in our Perkins indicators, which is part of the reason that we do this at the post-secondary level, because we want to make sure that our participation and completion rates are improving in our non-traditional programs. But also when we're working with the sites, the secondary sites in your schools, it's a way that we can show and we can also make an impact on the recruitment piece for Penn College. And it's kind of a win-win all the way around, because then we're helping you work with your recruitment and your completion rates at your school. But then also, if those students choose to come then to Penn College, that also then helps with our participation and our completion as well. So it's really a nice team process, I like to say.
Hey,
yes?
This is Jim. Hey, can we download the PowerPoint?
Yes, this is Mimi.
Oh.
Hi. So I'll show you how to do this. If you go to the top of the screen, on the right-hand side, you'll see, can you see that little icon? It looks like three pieces of paper laid one on top of the other. Yeah. And when you put your cursor over it, a little pop-up box says handout. If you click on that, there's actually two pieces of material available for you to download. One is the PowerPoint. The other is a handout about the expectations for the sites, which Elizabeth will refer to later in the presentation. But you can download them both from there and have them at your fingertips.
All right, great, thank you.
You're welcome. Sorry, Elizabeth, go ahead.
No, that's fine. This is, and I probably should have said that in the beginning. This is informal, so if we do have questions in the middle of it, go for it. One thing I want to note about Perkins that has really struck me is that the Perkins indicators tend to be the drivers for schools to get involved, and was largely a driver for another side of the college here to get involved in non-traditional. But even though the indicators, these particular indicators, start the interest of change for gender equity, I want to share that what I've learned through this experience with the 5-step program improvement process is that it's more than just Perkins indicators. When you're looking at your student population and you're looking at your institution, Perkins indicators starts the interest in driving this change. But what ends up happening is you're making an impact in the lives of these students that then translates, when you're able to break down barriers that students aren't able, that they don't even recognize are in place, so they choose certain careers over others and not ones that they may very well be successful in just because it is not equitable in gender, if I can say that. What we're doing is we're making an impact in the lives of students, we're making an impact in the workforce for this nation, and we're looking at the sustainability for our nation and the elimination of poverty and enhancement of the workforce, and this is just so much more important than just Perkins. And I wanted to add that because it's really been, that's part of the feel-good piece of this program and what really has driven me to be a part of it, because it makes a difference. It makes a difference in people's lives, and it makes a difference for our nation. And Mimi will talk a little bit more about that, but I just wanted to kind of preface that there. So when we talk about non-traditional fields, basically what that means are those occupations that have less than 25% of one gender or another, over another, okay? There is a federal list, and I can look that up and get it for you, that shows what the feds have determined are considered non-traditional. All programs through the NSF grant, we'll show you later, all of the secondary programs are considered non-traditional for females. Welding, diesel, etc. You'll see that. But something I want to emphasize about this before I turn it over to Mimi is, from your school's perspective, non-traditional does not have to be limited to what's non-traditional for women. We're going to be doing this process and this project and looking at these barriers. We want to look at it for both genders. We want to see what are the barriers for women as well as what are the barriers for men. How can we increase our numbers of men in dental hygiene or in healthcare, etc.? This is something, we talk primarily about STEM, women in STEM, because it does seem like that's a larger pool of work where we could make a change, but there is also the other side of what's non-traditional for men, and when we do this, looking at the data analysis and everything at your school, those pieces can be factored in as well. So, with that, I'll turn it over to Mimi, unless anyone has any questions. Okay, go for it, Mimi.
Okay. Sorry about the interesting phenomenon with the slide there, but okay. It must have something to do with the version of PowerPoint that I used in the Microsoft Live meeting.
And Mimi, I thought it was Spanish when it came up there.
It does kind of look, gives you that sense, right? Yeah. All right, well, we'll skip on by that. I just want to, I think Liz alluded to this issue around why this is important, but I wanted to just reinforce a couple of things and maybe give you a little bit of history about why it is that these measures happen to be in Perkins, because oftentimes people are curious about that if they don't understand the history of it and where it came from. And it also speaks, I think, to the fact that when we look at the resources available and the information that's out there that's available to help you, oftentimes much of it is focused on women's access to non-traditional careers. And it's not until more recently that there's been a stronger interest in men's access to non-traditional career fields. And so resources are beginning to be developed there, but the amount of information or amount of resources, videos and posters and research and all of that is much less available. But basically in the early 1970s, there's a report that the Children's Defense Fund released around the fact that a majority of children who were living in poverty were living in households where they had single-parent female, their mothers were single parents and heads of their households, and that they were women who were either underemployed, unemployed, on public assistance, or working in traditionally female-dominated occupations that tended to be low-wage jobs. One of the things that was occurring then, and it still continues to occur, is that women are entering the workforce at a faster rate than any of the other population groups. But they, however, tend to enter career areas where they hold the majority of low-paying jobs. And so there's an issue with pay gap and certainly pay equity in many fields. And so it was sort of the confluence of all of these initiatives or these issues that initially had this focus on non-traditional careers as a way out of poverty as the solution. So then that's in federal legislation when we started to see the idea about trying to increase access for non-traditional careers, for women in particular, to crop up in a variety of places. There's the Women's Educational Equity Act came up in the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. There's the Women in Non-Traditional Occupations Act was a piece in the Department of Labor's programs. And in Perkins, this issue was addressed early on, but primarily by having some set-aside funds that were available for schools to implement programs. But it's really this idea of non-traditional occupations for women as an access way or an entryway out of poverty. The reason the policy still continues to be in Perkins is that this change has not occurred yet. You know, social change requires usually generations to see differences occur. We've seen tremendous increase in women's access to professional occupations, but not sort of what I call middle career jobs or jobs in technical fields. There still tends to be a segregation of genders in those career fields, and so there still is an emphasis on those areas. And especially as we look at science, technology, engineering, and math-related careers, we can't afford to ignore 50% of the population as a potential workforce pool in a situation where we have job shortages, and many of those careers are going overseas, which affects, of course, our ability to compete economically in the global marketplace. So the policy continues. We're still looking at Perkins as a way to access or a way to engage women and men in career exploration, especially at the secondary level, a way for them to explore career fields that are maybe non-traditional to them, but are of interest, not necessarily ones that they would choose just because of who they are. And so it's really, I think, a way in which students can start to, see what all the options are that are available in order to derive better satisfaction from their career choice. So in concert with the U.S. Department of Education, the Office of Vocational and Adult Education, about 8 years ago, we helped them develop a process for looking at program improvement across all of the Perkins measures. So that includes academic attainment, technical skill attainment, graduation, completion, placement, as well as the two non-traditional measures. But then what we did was, after we finished that project with them, then we took the process and developed it into a piece that's specifically focused on the non-traditional career preparation component. So this is the process that we take the teams through. We start, first of all, by asking you for data, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But basically, we look at what's going on with enrollment data and completion data for students disaggregated by gender, by race, and special population, depending on your ability to do that, across all of your career and technical education programs. And we do a performance gap analysis to identify where there are gaps in performance in order to identify where you might want to focus your program improvement efforts. Then the second thing we do is bring the research into the conversation. We tell you about, we do a training on what does the research tell us about the barriers that students face to accessing non-traditional careers, and help the teams develop a strategy upon which they go back and do an action research project where they identify what barriers are in place on your campus that seem to be sort of holding students back from choosing non-traditional career fields. And then that then automatically takes us to the next step, which is, well, what solution or what intervention do we want to apply that would eliminate that particular barrier? And so the identification of a solution or strategy becomes very apparent, and it's relatively easy to determine what to do. A lot of it depends on resources, human resources, financial resources, time and energy, and what you can integrate into existing activities that you're already doing. This is not about building another great program. It's really about how do you integrate what we know works with students, depending on the barriers that they're facing in your school, into the things that you're already doing. And then the fourth step of part of that solution development is to create an evaluation plan for each of the sites to determine whether what they've done has effect, both short-term and long-term. And then we help you, give you technical assistance along the way as you implement your solutions and evaluate their results. So that's the process. Now, Liz mentioned earlier that, we look at this from the non-traditional career perspective, but I also wanted to say that this process can be applied to any of the Perkins measures or any program improvement efforts that you might want to utilize at your school. So even though you'll be going through this with us looking at non-traditional programs, you'll learn about how the process functions, and you can apply it to other things as well. So it has applicability in a variety of settings. So let me quickly share with you some of the solutions, some of the outcomes that we've seen. We actually have been doing this in 12 states across the country, and just to let you know that we've seen everything from changes in math enrollments in schools to looking at career and technical education programs. So this is one in Illinois where they saw a huge significant increase in girls taking advanced level math courses where they had not been prior to the application of the process. This was a summer camp program that was conducted at Plymouth High School in Wisconsin, where they had only the people who were involved with running the camp happened to bring their girls, and there were no other girls involved in the camp. To the following year, after they changed their outreach strategy, they had half of the participants in the camp program were female. So this is a science camp. Crowder High School's tripled their non-traditional enrollment in their CTE programs. This is a technical center, much like many of your centers are. And then this was a situation where in an auto technology program, they had the decision to make about employing an aide in the program to assist with students there. Made the decision they wanted to try to increase non-traditional role models in the classrooms, and so they chose a woman who had applied. And as a result of that, their enrollment went from 4 to 15. And then lastly, this is a Project Lead the Way school that had I called them the other day to see how they were doing with this. They implemented a program where they brought in non-traditional role models from the community, women engineers, and invited girls who were eligible for Project Lead the Way to an activity where the girls who were in PLTW ran hands-on activities with the other students, and they increased their enrollment from 8 to 24 in one semester, and I checked with them the other day, and their enrollment's now at 38. So that's continuing to have an impact, increasing in their participation rates. And the other good news they told me, too, was that all of these girls are staying in the program through the sequences. Their dropout rate is like nil with the girls in the program. So they're very happy with how this is going. So there's some suggestion that the process works. We've seen it. I could share lots of other stories. But I'm going to ask Liz now to talk a little bit about how we move forward with this and what the steps are to develop your team and get going.
Okay, thanks, Mimi.
Unless there are any questions. Okay. There'll be more details here to come.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mimi. We've talked, when I've been in conversation with Jim and with Bill, about who would be a part of the team development, because it is a team. I really want to emphasize it is a team initiative. That way not everything falls on one person's desk, because there's a lot of work that's involved with it, and having that team atmosphere enables brainstorming, synergy, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm going to switch over here to this document. Can everybody see pilot test site expectations?
Yes.
Okay. I believe we should have already seen this. This was part of the invitation that I sent out about getting involved with us with this program here. But just to kind of reiterate from this information here that administrators need to be a part of it. You really want your team to include data people. We use the term institutional researchers. I don't know how appropriate that is at the high school level or not, or CTC level. Coordinators, counselors, and STEM faculty. Jim, it sounds like you've put together a wide team so far that includes folks from these backgrounds. For Bill, that would be something, if you choose to become a part of this, that would be something to be looking at, who you could recruit to be a part of this, and allow for, equal distribution of work. And decision makers, it's important that we have decision makers, because that's what's going to help support the initiative in the program. Largely because it does, I'm going to share with what Dorothy Chappelle said at Jersey Shore. When they talked about doing this program improvement process, she said it wasn't just something that they wanted to do for a year or two to implement some change. And she wanted it to be a driving force that became a change of culture at their CTC, their comprehensive high school, I should say. So the decision makers to really help support the initiative and drive that change in culture so that this becomes part of an everyday life, these breaking down of these barriers and encouraging this participation and completion of gender equity. And then implementers for driving strategies and determining if they're being effective, doing the assessment, looking back over what's been done and what you're currently doing and how we can implement strategies into what's currently happening, as Mimi had talked about. Mimi, do you have anything you want to add?
Nope.
Okay.
No, I think the team approach is the way to go. And we can talk more about this as we go along, but I know that some of you are involved with the technical assistance program at PDE, and we may want to think about, in those situations, how to integrate this into that particular process as one of the improvement measures that you're looking at as far as the TAP is concerned. But again, that's something that you all, we can discuss as we go down the line. So, and there, whoever's involved in that, I mean, the idea being you could potentially integrate this into that.
Elizabeth, this is Jim. We've already done that up here. We've already talked to Don Fellner, who's our TIP guy, and he knows what we're doing with this.
Oh, okay.
Super.
Great. Well, if you see on the next slide, it talks about commitment and investment. This is why we're looking at a team approach, because it does take some commitment and investment. Again, I want to reiterate, it says support gender equity in STEM. We want to branch that out to all areas that have non-traditional enrollment and completion issues. We're looking at 2 days of training. Mimi had mentioned we do training for steps 1 and 2 in one day, and that is already tentatively scheduled for January 11th. I think, Jim, you confirmed that that's okay with your people, and that's on all of our calendars. So January 11th would be the first training, at which time we'd want to have our data and everything to me or to Mimi before then, so she could have it ready for when we start that training.
That's not a problem.
Okay. 3 to 5 days of root cause research. Mimi, help me here a little bit. That's really when we analyze that data and really look at what we think those barriers are to enrollment and completion for students. You kind of decide based on what you look at in the data and say, is this really in fact the case, or is it something completely different? And so there's some assessment and some research. It's not, I don't think you could write a dissertation on the research that you do just for the root cause piece, but you do a little bit of work and effort to determine if those barriers are in fact the case, or if it is something different. And because of that then, looking at those barriers, and we have all this documented, and there's resources here to help you. It's not just something you have to come up with on your own. But you look at those barriers then and say, what are we already doing? What are the strategies that have been proven to help overcome these barriers, and how can we mesh that together? And so that takes a little bit of time. Obviously, teams want to meet monthly to make sure everybody's on the same page, to make sure the program is moving forward, and to help then implement the action plan that's then decided after we go through our second day of training, which we'll probably look to schedule April-May timeframe, if not sooner than that, based on how quickly we can move forward. That second day of training talks about what is the implementation plan, how do we want to go about doing it, how do we want to assess it, because again, it's data-driven. You want to take a look and see what are the results from what you're doing to make sure that you are on track, or if you need to make any changes. And again, resources are available through the entire process, through the NAEP website, the STEM Equity Pipeline website, Penn College, the whole 9 yards. So what we're looking at, what we would need to have well in advance of January 11th would be, this here says Perkins data for the last 2 years, disaggregated by program, gender, race and ethnicity, and special pop status if we have it. We originally asked for 2 years, but what we would be looking at is as many years back as you can find, up to 5 years, because we've tried to request 5-year data from PDE in the past, and that's proven to be a little bit more challenging than we had originally hoped. So if you have 5 years of data, that would ideally be the best way to take a look at what we think the trends are, the barriers that may possibly be there, and how we could look at confirming that. In addition,
let me just hop in for a second and just say that what I would send the site is a data request, which articulates exactly what we're looking for, and Excel spreadsheets for you to populate. Or if you have the data in some other form and you want to send it to us, we can populate the data sets. But basically, we're just looking for each of your career and technical education programs, depending on which ones you identify, and they're ones that we're most interested in, of course, that align with the Marcellus Shale project. But we'll do it for any program you send us. We just need to know for enrollment, the numbers of males and females, and then the breakdown by race, ethnicity, and then by social population status, if you have that. And then also for completion, so that we can track those 2 performance measures for Perkins. And the reason we'd like to have more than 2 years is in order to be able to do any kind of trend analysis, you have to have at least 3, and 5 is more ideal, because you don't know whether or not your data is going up or down, or you're just in a slump for a year or something like that, because sometimes these measures in particular can be fairly volatile. One student moving in and out of a program can make a big difference because the numbers are generally quite small. So if we have 5 years of data, it's much better.
Now, Mimi, I'm gonna bring in a monkey wrench, maybe. Jim, at your institution, you have certain programs that you are looking to start that are STEM programs, correct? But you don't have enrollment data for.
Well, they won't start until next school year.
Okay.
Okay. There's no problem in pulling out the 5 years of data, and if Mimi sends it to me in the Excel, that's not going to be a problem in getting that information.
That's great.
But the thing is, this is Jeanette, that while they're just getting started, there also means they're just starting their recruitment and they're starting their conversation of how they present those new majors to their potential clients.
Exactly, which is a beautiful place to be.
Oh, great.
This is Mimi. Because, Jim, what you can do in this instance is develop a strategy for how you're going to conduct outreach around these programs to ensure right from the get-go that these programs don't start out looking unbalanced, so that students start to think, oh, well, that's a program just for boys or that's a program just for girls. You have an opportunity here to really do some significant targeted outreach that we know from research works, and it would be great to be in that position rather than trying to fix something that's not quite working.
Piece of cake.
Great.
Good.
Great. In discussion of the non-traditional programs that we're focusing on for the NSF grant, but again, open to all non-traditional programs, these were just what we had identified in the NSF grant as those programs at the high school level that would matriculate and correspond to natural gas occupations at the post-secondary level. So.
But you don't need to limit to just those. We just wanted you to see which ones were originally identified.
Correct. Correct. And so here's our training. So it's a 2-part training. Part 1 will be January 11th over Step 1 and Step 2. And we can talk more about that as we are there at the training. And then Part 2, as we said, probably March, April, May, as soon as we could, after we successfully complete what we need for Part 1. Then we would look at selecting the strategy, developing an evaluation for that strategy, and then how we would implement that for our program here. Just a little bit more of kind of spelling out the additional work that we'd be looking at after the training. I talked about you look at the data, you find out what the barriers are, and then you go back to your sites and you conduct a little bit of data analysis, additional root cause research, and you confirm what in fact those barriers are to enrollment for your students. Coming back then after Part 2 training, you look at implementing the solution that you've identified in Part 2 and continue to conduct that evaluation to make sure that it is in fact working and that we are in fact making a difference. Now there's a bottom piece here that says Pilot Site Showcase. which is where we just like to tell everybody what we're doing when we're doing a good job. And that's it, sharing results at the Integrated Learning Conference or at the PACTA Conference or other areas where it's appropriate to share gender equity processes and programs that are happening at the school level. So that's what I have for that. I can turn it over to Mimi. We can all field questions here. If anybody has anything, or if we did such a great job.
Any questions? Everybody ready to go? Just no, maybe.
They're thinking.
Thinking.
Bill, can we put you on the spot and see what you think after seeing all this information, and if it might be something that you're interested in being a part of?
It's something I'd like to be a part of, but not at this moment.
Okay.
And the reason I say not at this moment, I'm already extended my time for a midpoint review for strategic plan, which I'm still gathering data to get that done. Of course, our PSSA scores, being an AYP. Or not making AYP. So we're concentrating on some math strategies to get our math scores up. So I have my people doing that. Of course, our NOCTI test, we did very well with that, but that's always a constant, making sure that you do well on that. So the candles are already being burned on both ends at this point in time with me being here. I like it. I would love to get involved with that. I think STEM-wise, I think my 7 sending schools are looking for opportunities to offer, to offer non-traditional things to all their kids, in the STEM areas. So I meet with them on Friday. So we'll be looking at that, and I'll be talking with them about that. Now you said this is a 3-year process. What are you going to do next year?
Well, what I said before was this was a 3-year grant for NSF. We're in year 2 of the 3-year grant for NSF. Okay. But this 5-step improvement process is not just 3 years. It's as long as you're willing to continue to evaluate and reevaluate and look at what you're doing and make improvements in what you're doing. It can become part of your culture at your institution.
Well, I agree. And I think some of the problems with trying to get non-traditional, some of the programs are so old and haven't been upgraded. We have to infuse a lot of energy and make these programs more viable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, true.
Well, Bill, and this is Jeanette. In terms of the number of years, as always, if I see a project that I think is working and making a difference, and I'll do everything I can to find a funding stream for it. So whether or not we're going to be able to maintain this funding stream after the end of this first 3 years of the NSF grant, I don't know. It's clearly all allowable under Perkins. I probably wouldn't want to spend 10 college Perkins money on it, but there's no reason why, if it's really valuable and it's helping you meet some of your numbers, that you couldn't look at putting a little funding towards it. I don't think that when you look at expenses, the biggest expenses, other than Mimi, whom we love, but in terms of internally, it's time. It's always time and energy, and I think you're right on in terms of looking at making sure you have enough time to get started. Now, next year, I think we're right now, Liz, and help me out here. I think we're right now also talking about to Lois Richards about coming on next year.
Yes, and as well as Monroe County CTC, or Monroe CTI, I think it is. So there are other schools that are interested in getting started in the beginning of the school year next year as well.
I think that's where we're at. I think that's where it puts us because, like I said, with the plate's really full right now with what we need to do with not many Act 80 days. And having, and everybody's making cuts and having money to send people out mm-hmm. and have people commit. It's this year, next year, it's going to be kind of tough.
Well, I think what we need to do, I guess it's like this, Bill, and same with Jim, as you guys figure out how committed you want to be, I say I'd rather have you working with us at some level than no level at all, even if all you're doing is getting trained without doing the work right now. And then at some point along the way, in case the money were to go to waste, you'd have a little bit more skill to when you're ready to turn to it. So I guess I'm just inviting you to do what you need to do. And, you know, if you can't come in this year, that's cool. I understand. And then we'll make sure we have room for you next year if you can. The year after that, I don't know what I can promise, but
Right.
you can sure try.
Well, again, we've always been very cooperative with many programs, and like I said, and we go back a long way, Doctor.
Yep.
And I think it's an excellent program, and would we like to do that? Absolutely. But again, there's just so many things, and that's not a whiny answer that I'm giving you. There's just a lot of things, a lot of plates in the air right now for us.
Yep, and maybe you'll get a couple of new staff members someplace along the line who just are gung-ho and fiery and has just a little bit of their passion too, and then you'll know where to come.
Well, and that's a problem too, with everybody having to make cuts with what the governor did. You have to cringe when somebody leaves here. Are they going to let us continue to fill the position?
Yep.
So.
Well,
I
I appreciate your input and your feedback, Bill. I think that's important, and we'll just keep you in the loop as to what's happening. And like Jeanette said, for Jim and your team, if I can turn it over to you because you still have a few minutes here. My impression is you're on board and you'll be willing to join us, and I can follow up with you then with the Excel documents that Mimi can provide to get your data, and we can analyze it and plan to get together on the 11th. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, I'm going to talk to Dr. Davis to firm up the 11th to make, give for absolute positive, so we can get that in the schedule for sure. And then I think we can go ahead and move forward.
Okay. Great. Well, welcome aboard.
Okay. By the way, I am horrible on names, and Graham Anthony I got correct. The other one I was a little off. Her name is Ashley Hughes.
I'll tell you what, Jim, why don't you ship us all an email with your team's name on it? That would be, maybe an email with that and copy all of them so we'll have everybody's email address.
Okay, the other thing is I want to take this recording, and you can tell me how to do it. I want to go ahead and contact the other counselors in the other sending schools so that they can listen to this to see if we can pull them in and get as many as we can to come in on that 11 January meeting.
That's not a problem. We can send you the link to the archive, Jim. No problem.
Okay, good.
Okay.
So, Greg, I know you're hearing us somewhere.
Yes, I'm clear.
Greg, if you can just, when you get this up and...
I'll send a link to you and Elizabeth.
Okay, beautiful.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, everyone. I'm going to head out. This is Bill. Bye.
Hi, Bill.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Bill. See ya.
Bye. We got a comment here.
Yes?
Go ahead.
I just wanted, as we were going through the PowerPoint and I was listening to what you were saying, there's one, I don't know that it's necessarily a demographic, but it's a situation that every one of the Career Centers faces, and that is the budget cuts are forcing a lot of our sending schools to cut back on the amount of students that they're sending to the Career Centers. And here you are trying to get in a non-traditional group, and we're finding, I'm seeing in the district that I actually live in, that a lot of the non-traditional students that we would want here are the ones that some of the guidance counselors and the staff at the sending school are rerouting and not sending to us. So there's a large hurdle that we've got to somehow try to get around.
This is Mimi, and yeah, we've been working with quite a few career technical centers, and that is definitely one of the barriers that often comes up in the root cause research piece. But speaking to the issue of the data, one of the things that I hadn't thought about that we've actually done in a couple of the schools is we've actually looked at the data by sending school so that we could see, for example, trends over years about which of your sending schools tend to send you a greater or majority of your non-traditional students. There's also some very interesting data that you can look at in that regard. And certainly educating counselors about the opportunities available to students at the Career Technical Center, especially non-traditional students, is an important piece. And there are some strategies that we've implemented over the years with some of the Career Tech Centers that have been fairly successful, and we can certainly, we'll talk about those and share them, and they may be things you'd want to implement. But yeah, the sending school issue is a big one. So Jim, in your data set, if I asked you for sending school information, can you identify, for example, how many of your non-traditional students are coming from which sending school?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll include that in the data request.
Okay.
And this is really good because one of the things we'll do with the team at the training in January is, in addition to the data request that we already made, there may be some other data points that you want to look at in your performance gap, but if you can identify them now, like you just did with this one, ahead of time, then that's valuable because then we can have that analysis done before we meet in January and look at that. So if there's anything else,
hey Jim, let me ask you something. You don't have any a minority population, do you, of any kind, do you, up there?
No.
Okay. I just thought I'd, put that on the table, Mimi. I know we've talked, with Williamsport we talked about that, but
okay. So
they're pretty white bread up there.
Okay. So the race data may not be very valuable.
It'll be useless.
Yes, yes
okay.
It would be.
Am I right, Jim? Really, how many in your whole population across your district? I'm going to guess you're going to be less than 0.5% of every population minority you could think of.
Agreed.
Okay.
So is socioeconomic status more important? Can you identify students by their eligibility for free and reduced lunch?
Yes.
So would we want to look at that instead, maybe?
For me, that would be, and eventually we want to look at, again, this was not something they would collect, but once we get into Penn College now, we'll be looking at first generation potential college students also. But yeah, from the grant perspective, low SES would be an awesome piece for us to be looking at.
Yeah, we can pull that out.
Okay. Yeah. So economically disadvantaged, which is the terminology used in Perkins.
Yep. Your Excel spreadsheet's getting larger and larger.
Yeah. Well, it's actually, I'm going to take if the race data is not valuable, I'll take it out. And so if SES is important, that's actually one of the special population groups. I don't know that single parents or displaced homemakers probably are irrelevant. I can take that out too.
You can take that out.
English is a second language. Do you have very many second language speakers?
No. That'd be a small portion.
Really tiny. Okay, so we won't look at that. Students with disabilities is probably important, so we'll leave that in, and then we'll look at sending school, what sending school they're coming from. So one of the things I'll need to put in the spreadsheet would be the names of each of your sending school. If you could email that list of who your sending schools are to Liz, and she can get that to me, and I'll put that in the request.
Okay.
And Liz, I'm assuming we actually already have that in the articulation system, don't we?
We do, and I was just getting ready to say that I can send that information to you today, Mimi.
Oh, great. Okay, thanks, Liz. So I'll put that in the data request. And then I'll try to get this data request out to you by the end of the week so that you have plenty of time to get it filled and back to me by the beginning of at least the week before the training. It takes us about a week to do the analysis. So.
Yeah, that's fine because I'm going to be at a ShellNet training for the rest of the week. So.
Okay. So by Monday is okay?
That's to be good.
Okay, good.
Great, and we'll figure, Jim, if you can, just have everybody, send everybody's email to me, and then I'll make sure we all get that. Because, Mimi, I don't know if I'll be able to forward that on Monday, so we'll get there.
Okay.
I'll follow up with you.
Will do.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
We still on?
Yeah, I am. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,